My wife told me she was going to yoga on Thursday nights. 4 months, every single Thursday she'd kiss me on the cheek, grab her gym bag and be back by 9:30 with wet hair and a tired smile. I never questioned it. She'd been talking about getting into a routine for years, and I was glad she'd finally found something. The Thursday everything changed, she didn't come back by 9:30. By 10 I was texting her. By 10:45 I was calling. By 11 I was doing the thing you do when someone you love doesn't answer and your mind starts filling the silence with its own terrible ideas. And then at 11:47 she called. The sound of her voice stopped every thought I'd been having cold. "Adam," her voice was shaking, "I need you to come get me. I'm in the parking garage on 5th and Monroe, level 2. I'm okay, but there's a man who's been following me and she took a breath. "I need you to come, and when you do, I need to show you something I've been hiding from you for 4 months. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Those 3 words were what I kept hearing on the 15-minute drive downtown. Not the part about being followed, not the parking garage address, not even whether she was safe. The part my mind locked onto was, "I've been hiding something from you for 4 months. Because here's the thing about those words when they come from your wife at midnight. They don't land neutral. They land in the exact shape of your worst fear, and they stay there. I need to be honest with you about what I believed on that drive, and I'm not proud of it, but I believed with a clarity that felt like certainty that my wife of 14 years had been spending her Thursday nights with someone else. I'd seen the signs, I'd told myself I was being paranoid and ignored them, and now here it was, the confirmation I hadn't wanted to find, arriving in her voice at midnight over the phone. 4 months, I'm sorry. I drove too fast, I ran a yellow light at Clement Street, and the whole way downtown I was building the story. Her name is Nora. We'd been together 16 years, married 14. We had a good life, a real one, a house in Columbus, 2 dogs, a plan to visit Portugal the following spring that we'd been putting off for 2 years. I was a regional logistics manager at a mid-size freight company. She was a dental hygienist. We weren't a perfect couple, but we were solid, or I thought we were. 4 months ago she'd changed, subtle at first, more time on her phone, a kind of distracted quality, like part of her mind was always somewhere else. She started being vague in ways she'd never been vague before, just running some errands, just catching up on some things. She began taking her phone into the bathroom. She flinched once when I reached for her phone to show her something funny, then laughed it off. She was tired more often, and the tiredness had an edge to it, like it came from somewhere she wasn't willing to talk about. I'd found a name once, scrawled on a post-it note on her side of the dresser. Griffin Pace, a man's name. I'd asked her about it, and she said it was a referral from someone at work. She threw the note away that evening. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I trusted her, and I did trust her, or I tried to. But trust when you're afraid starts to feel a lot like naivety. She was standing next to a gray concrete pillar on level 2 when I pulled in, a leather document portfolio clutched against her chest like a shield. She was pale. Her eyes were scanning the garage over my shoulder even as she got in the car. I didn't hug her. That tells you where my head was. I waited until we were out of the garage and 3 blocks away before either of us said anything. "Are you okay?" I finally asked. "I'm okay." She had the portfolio in her lap. "Adam, I know what this looks like. I know what you must be thinking. And I need you to let me explain before you say anything, all of it, from the beginning." "Were you followed?" "Yes. Or I think so. There was a car behind me from the moment I left the building. When I pulled into the garage, it sat outside for a long time. I don't know who it was." "What building?" She looked at me and I could see her deciding something. That's part of what I need to explain. We drove in silence for 4 minutes. When we got home, she sat at the kitchen table with the portfolio in front of her, and I sat across from her, and I want to tell you about that moment, the 2 of us at our own kitchen table at midnight, because it had a weight to it I don't think I've ever felt before or since. Like the whole 14 years of our marriage was balancing on whatever was in that leather folder. I want to tell you what I was actually thinking, because it's the part I'm most ashamed of now. I was thinking Griffin Pace, 4 months of Thursday nights, the phone taken to the bathroom, the way she'd been distracted, distant, carrying something she wouldn't share. I was thinking, I'm about to sit here and watch my wife explain to me that she's been seeing someone. I was thinking about whether I'd be able to stay in the room when she said it, or whether I'd need to walk out. I was thinking about the dogs and who would keep them. I was thinking at midnight at my own kitchen table about lawyers. That's how completely I had convinced myself of something that was not true. I had already written the ending before she opened the portfolio. "I need to start 4 months ago," she said, "in February. You remember I helped you pull together the documents for our tax return?" I nodded. "While I was going through the paperwork, I found something in your 401 statement that didn't look right to me, a discrepancy. Small, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't paying close attention. I almost didn't catch it myself, but I did, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it." I stared at her. I did some research that week on my own, just trying to figure out if I was wrong, if it was a clerical error, but the more I looked, the more I found. And Adam, her voice dropped. It's Howard. Howard. Howard Bale, my boss, my mentor, the man who had given me my first real shot in this industry 12 years ago, who had promoted me twice, who sat next to me at my father's funeral and picked up the bar tab afterward without making a thing of it. Howard, who called me kid even now, even at 39, and meant it warmly. Howard, who had an American flag on his desk and a photo of his grandkids on his credenza, and who always remembered your coffee order on Monday mornings. What do you mean it's Howard? My voice came out flat. He's been stealing from the pension fund. She said it quietly, like she was trying to hand me something made of glass. Not just ours, everybody's, 43 employees. He's been siphoning contributions for at least 3 years, running them through a series of shell accounts structured to look like routine administrative fees. Very careful, very deliberate. But it's theft, Adam. Pension fraud. The kind that leaves people walking into retirement with nothing. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I didn't come to you right away, she said, and I know that's the part that needs the most explaining. I need you to understand why. She opened the portfolio. Inside were organized sections, tabbed and meticulous, financial documents I recognized and some I didn't, printed account records with handwritten annotations in her careful script, a bound report from an investigative firm, a stack of emails highlighted and flagged, and in the front pocket a folder of what appeared to be legal filings with a federal agency header at the top. In March, she said, I hired an investigator. His name is Griffin Pace. Griffin Pace, the name on the post-it note. The name I'd been turning over in my mind for weeks like it was evidence of something terrible, like it was a man's name for a reason, and it was a man's name, just not the reason I'd assumed. He works financial fraud cases, Nora said. He came recommended by a friend of mine from the dental office who'd used him in a business dispute 2 years ago. I paid him in cash. I know you noticed the withdrawals. I'm sorry I couldn't explain them at the time. I sat there and let that settle. The Thursday nights, the cash, the phone calls taken outside, the name on the post-it. All of it assembling itself into something completely different than the story I'd been building. And I wasn't there yet, not fully, because the mind doesn't pivot easily from a story it's been constructing for months. I was still watching from the bank, not yet ready to wade in. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. She folded her hands on the table. 2 reasons. Both of them are going to be hard to hear, so I want you to let me finish before you respond. I nodded. The first reason is that Griffin told me early on that Howard may have access to company financial systems in ways that could extend to employee-linked accounts, depending on how things are set up. If Howard suspected he was being investigated, he could move the money, destroy records, cover his tracks completely, or retaliate against you, against your position. I didn't want him to know anything was happening until we had everything airtight and in the hands of people with the authority to stop him. Telling you meant the risk that you'd confront him, or that it would show on your face at work, or that you'd make a move before we were ready. I wasn't willing to take that chance with something this big. I sat with it, landed somewhere real. And the second reason. She looked at me for a moment before answering. Because of who Howard is to you. I know what he means to you, Adam. I know he was there when your dad died. I know you've said more than once that he believed in you when nobody else at that company did. I know this is going to hurt in a way that goes beyond the money. She paused. I wanted to be completely, absolutely sure before I blew that up for you. I wanted the proof in my hands, the legal protection in place, and a clear path forward before I made you look at the man you'd trusted for 12 years and understand that he had been robbing you the entire time. I didn't want to hand you half a story and leave you sitting with it for months while we finished building the case. I wanted to give you the whole truth at once, with the door already open on the other side of it. Let me stop here, because this is the part I have to be honest about. While my wife was sitting in parking garages on Thursday nights, meeting with an investigator and an attorney to protect our retirement, I was at home constructing a case against her in my own head. While she was organizing evidence and losing sleep and navigating the risk that came with building a federal case against a man who had resources and connections and possibly someone watching, I was at home counting the days between her absences and feeling sorry for myself. I was doing the math on our mortgage. I was thinking about lawyers. I had been suspicious of the person who was fighting hardest for me. That's the sentence I keep coming back to. That's the one I can't get away from. And I need to tell you something about what that realization feels like when it first arrives, because it's not the relief you might expect. People assume that finding out your wife isn't having an affair would flood you with relief, with gratitude, with some warm restoration of faith. What it actually did, at least for me, was crack something open in a completely different way. Because yes, the relief was there, but underneath it was a shame so sharp it was almost physical, And underneath the shame was something even harder, the recognition of how little faith I'd actually carried. 14 years of marriage, 14 years of Nora being exactly who she said she was. One season of silence had been enough for me to throw all of that away and go looking for the worst possible explanation. I sat at that kitchen table and I told her. All of it. I didn't soften it. I told her I'd thought Griffin Pace was a man she was seeing. I told her about the nights I'd sat with a hollow feeling I didn't know what to do with. I told her about the Tuesday I'd driven past a family law office on 4th Street and looked at the sign for a few seconds too long before making myself drive on. She listened to every word without flinching. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. How long, she asked, just asking. Seriously, a few weeks. Before that, I kept telling myself I was imagining it. She nodded slowly. I knew something was off with you. I could feel it. And I hated it, hated every single week of not being able to explain, of watching you try to figure out what was wrong and having no way to fix it yet. That was the hardest part of all of this, not the investigation, not the attorney, not the parking garages. It was coming home to you and knowing you were hurting and not being able to say anything yet because we weren't done. She exhaled. I'm sorry you went through that. She'd been followed through a parking structure that night, and she was apologizing to me. What I felt in that moment I don't have a clean word for. Broken is the closest thing. Broken open. Everything I'd been holding on to, the suspicion, the fear, the ugly quiet certainty I'd been so careful to keep to myself, it all came apart at once, and what was underneath it was a grief I hadn't expected. Not grief over anything lost, grief over how close I'd come to poisoning something real with a story I'd invented out of silence and fear. Howard Bale was placed on administrative leave the following Monday and arrested 6 weeks after that. The federal charges were significant: pension fund fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement exceeding $2 million over 3 years. His attorney entered a not guilty plea that convinced no one. The evidence Nora and Griffin Pace had assembled over 4 months of Thursday nights was thorough enough that Howard's own legal team pushed for a plea deal within 3 months of the indictment. He was sentenced to 7 years. He'll be in his mid-70s when he gets out. I've thought a lot about how I feel about that, about Howard, and the honest answer is not what I expected. I thought I'd feel rage. I wanted to feel rage. 12 years, a funeral, 100 Monday morning coffees, and the man had been quietly bleeding us dry the entire time. Rage seemed like the appropriate response, the clean one. What I actually feel is a weary, complicated grief. Because the Howard I knew, the one who remembered the coffee order, who sat with me when I lost my father, who said kid like it meant something, that version of him may have been entirely performed. And you can't be furious at a performance the way you're furious at an actual person who cared about you and chose to hurt you anyway. You just grieve the thing you believed was real. You grieve the friend who turns out to have been a character someone was playing. 43 employees had their pension contributions restored through the federal restitution process. It took nearly a year, and it wasn't simple, but it happened. What Nora built in 4 months of Thursday nights held up in federal court and put money back into the retirement accounts of people who would otherwise have discovered the theft only after it was too late to recover from it. Retired teachers. A warehouse supervisor from Dayton who'd been with the company for 19 years. A woman in accounting who was 61 and had 2 years left before she planned to retire. Nora saved all of it, not me. I contributed nothing to that outcome except doubt. I want to be direct about that because pretending otherwise would dishonor what she actually did. I spent the months after the arrest trying to be present in the ways I hadn't been. I went with her to every follow-up meeting. I sat in Camille Okafor's office, Nora's attorney, a woman who I came to think of as one of the sharpest people I've ever been in a room with, and handled the paperwork that needed handling. Small gestures, nothing close to what she'd done, but it was what I had. About 2 months after the arrest, I came home from work one evening and found Nora on the back porch with a glass of iced tea. The dogs were at her feet. She looked peaceful in a way she hadn't looked since February, since before she found the discrepancy in the tax documents, and the weight of all of it settled onto her shoulders. She looked like someone who had put down something very heavy and was only now noticing how much lighter the air was without it. I sat down next to her. The night in the parking garage, I said after a while, when you called me and told me you were sorry, what did you think I thought? She considered that for a moment. I thought you were probably somewhere close to the truth, that you'd noticed too many things and filled in the gaps the wrong way. She glanced at me. I wasn't angry. I understood it. I'd left you a silence big enough to fill with anything. And fear always fills silence with the worst version of the story. Fear always fills silence with the worst version of the story. I've been turning that over ever since, because it's the most accurate description I have of what happened inside me over those 4 months, and because it's also the most useful thing I've ever learned about myself. I am someone who, when left without enough information about the people I love, will fill that gap with catastrophe. I'd done it unconsciously and convincingly and completely, and I had been wrong about every single piece of it. We did make it to Portugal, November, gray and beautiful, 10 days in Lisbon and then a few days along the coast. We didn't talk about any of it for the first 3 days, and then we talked about all of it for the rest of the trip. The kind of conversations that only happen when something cracks you both open enough to have them. The full inventory of fears that don't usually surface until a marriage goes through something that tests the foundation. She told me she'd been afraid to tell me even after it was over, afraid I'd be hurt that she hadn't brought me in from the beginning. I told her that wasn't where I landed, that what I actually felt was closer to awe, and to a humility that doesn't go away fast, the kind that lives in you afterward and changes how you move through things. I told her all of it, about the divorce math, about the Tuesday and the family law office sign. She listened to the whole confession without flinching, the way she always has, and when I finished she said something I want to write down here exactly as she said it. "You've spent this whole time telling me the ways you doubted me. I want you to know something in return. Not once, not one single time in 4 months, did I doubt you. You were always worth it. I need you to know that. There's a version of me that still can't fully receive that still flinches at what he was thinking while she was in that parking garage on his behalf. But there's another version, the one who walks through the door every evening and tries to be worth the faith she never once withdrew, that is getting closer every day to believing he might deserve it. Here's what I keep coming back to when I think about all of it. Every sign I read as betrayal was actually evidence of her loyalty. The distance that scared me was the width of the space she was holding open between me and something that would have blindsided me. The secrecy I resented was the weight she was carrying alone so I wouldn't have to. The very things I read as proof that she'd stopped fighting for our marriage were in fact the clearest proof of how hard she was fighting for it. I had the whole story backwards, every word of it. I think about that a lot, about how completely and convincingly fear can rewrite the people you love, how it can take 14 years of evidence and dissolve all of it in a few weeks of silence and distance, how the ugliest interpretation of someone's behavior is almost never the truest one, and how reaching for it first, before asking, before waiting, before extending the credit that 14 years of loyalty should have bought, is a failure of something more important than logic. The people who love us are sometimes fighting battles for us that we know nothing about. The withdrawal that frightens you is not always a retreat. Sometimes it's a deployment. Sometimes the person who seems to be pulling away is the one standing between you and something you don't even know is coming your way. Before you let your fear write the story of someone you love, ask yourself what their track record is actually worth. Ask yourself if you've really earned the conclusion your fear is handing you, or if you're just holding it because the silence was long enough that something had to go in it. I nearly let my own fear cost me the most loyal person I have ever known, and she never stopped fighting for me the whole time I was doubting her, not for a single Thursday night. If this landed with you, I want to hear from you below. Tell me about a time you had the story completely backwards. Tell me what it felt like when the truth came through. I read every single one. And if there's someone in your life right now you've been quietly building a case against, someone whose silence you've been filling in the worst possible way, go talk to them before that silence hardens into something you can't walk back. I promise you, from the far side of getting it wrong, the story your fear is telling you is almost never the true one.